Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nubeva's channel. We're sitting here once again with Randy, and I'm coming to you live from the library. Randy, tell me about your background over there.
Absolutely. I think my kids will hate me for this, but as you know, I live in Madrid. I'm a Real Madrid fan,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to alienate those that are Barcelona fans. Typically, you're either one or the other one. So I have a Barcelona background here. So, they recently lost Messi, but don't worry about that. You've lost Maradona in the past 30 years ago, Ronaldinho 10, 15 years ago, and you came back and you won Champions League and league titles. Not a problem. Barcelona will survive this.
Fair enough, Randy. Fair enough. There's two types of fans. Some that would say that's great, you're showing support to them, and others would say there's one team you can support, Randy. What are you doing, flipping?
I am only supporting Real Madrid. I wouldn't put on a Barcelona jersey. So there, that's
Okay,
where I draw the line. But I think supporting them emotionally right now that they're going through tough times, I think that's the right thing.
that's fair. That's a good point. All right, well, down to business, Randy.
All
So you
right.
guys made a humongous announcement. You guys
Absolutely.
announced ransomware recovery capability. So how is this? How did you solve ransomware?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, this is actually very interesting. We've been doing this for quite a few months now. And it's very interesting because about a year ago, as you know, we recover keys from everything, from all encryption, right? TLS, SMB, you name it, right? And so about a year ago, we were thinking about this and I thought, and I think we talked about this last week too. We were thinking about this and I said, well, we could do this for ransomware. But I was so ignorant about that. I did not think there was that big of a problem. I kept thinking, if you have backups and snapshots, if somebody encrypts all your files, you just take it back from a snapshot from 5 seconds ago and off you go.
Hmm.
And then I didn't realize, I'm sure we're going to talk about this. We talked about this a little bit last time, but it's just a much bigger problem than we thought. So this is absolutely exciting. We got it out of the labs, testing it with customers right now, prospects. It's fantastic.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's back it up just a little bit first and explain to people what ransomware is. Now, it's definitely caught on a lot in common language nowadays, but a lot of people
Yes.
still might not be up to speed on what it is ransomware truly does.
Absolutely. So what happens is you have some malware and you may have to click it. Sometimes you don't even have to click it. It's really hard to describe how all the different ways of getting onto your system. But safe to say, bad malware can get on any computer system. And then what it does is it goes around and looks at all your files. It stops your backups, your snapshots. And so right there, those are the two things that I didn't realize ransomware used to do. So what it goes about is it'll encrypt all your files. And then they come back and they say, well, if you want to be able to get your files back, it's not in backup anymore. They deleted that. It's not in your snapshots. They stopped that. And so if you want to get your files back, you either got to pay them or try to restore it back from long ago. So that's essentially how ransomware works. Okay, so if you've been tracking the news from that standpoint, Colonial Pipeline, I think a few months ago, I think I want to say almost every single day or at least once a week now, you're getting something big, right? So we heard a couple of weeks ago, Howard University was shut down by ransomware. COVID didn't even shut them down, and yet how ransomware did. It's just staggering. Another company called T-Tech, which supplies the support for Verizon, Best Buy, Kaiser, it was shut down. And so that day I actually called Verizon for my phone. I have this iPhone 12 that I was getting 5G on, and I called them and they just wouldn't answer. And then I saw that news. I go, okay, well, that got hit. So it's a $20 billion problem. It's growing 200% year over year. It's a staggering, unbelievable problem.
Yeah, so this seems to be affecting virtually every industry because everything's connected now, everything's online, and as you said, it's a staggering problem. And what have they been doing so far to try to fix it, aside from just giving them the money and giving up the goods?
Yeah, so I think what cybersecurity companies have been doing, it's fantastic. It becomes to your typical cat and mouse game. So they'll try to detect, are your files being modified? Is there something weird on your system? Make sure you're up to date on signatures, et cetera. But at the same time, the cat is doing more and more and more, but the mouse is doing tremendously more, to the point where you have ransomware now that will actually allow others, not just the developers of the ransomware, but others to go in and say, you know what, I'm going to encrypt that ransomware. So whatever your signatures you had last week that worked and caught me, well, this week, anybody, not a developer, not somebody that's technical, can go in, modify that, and put a new ransomware out there. So this cat and mouse game, I gotta say, unlike other cybersecurity issues, the mouse is really innovating like crazy, and they're just appears to be winning at this point, to the point where you start seeing governments, right, the agencies going at this. So that's essentially what you can do. The other thing is you got to restore from backup. So people are starting to back up now to the cloud, to other things. but there's just no silver bullet. It's just cat and mouse game, and sooner or later, it feels like you're gonna get hit.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely like an arms race, and it's exhausting, and that in itself is a big money sink as well. So,
Right.
with that said, you say you have a solution to the problem?
Yeah. So absolutely. So if you think about what we've talked about for months in our interviews and discussions, right? We get keys from encryption, whether that's TLS, SMB, you name it, right? So from tens of thousands of different programs, we get the keys for people to go analyze the data and discover whether there's malware. Well, that's exactly the same thing that we can do for ransomware. There's really no ways about it. And that's fundamentally what we do, right? So we go out, and when some ransomware is trying to take over your files, start encrypting them, well, we get the keys. And typically what they do is the more sophisticated ones will create a key per file. And so what we do is we go out there and get every single key for every single file. And so at the end of it, your typical two options used to be you pay for the ransom, or you recover from backup. Yeah. In our case, you just ran a software to decrypt everything back how it was. In fact, we run just as fast, or sometimes faster than the ransomware, and so you actually recover it just at the same speed as you're getting the ransomware on your system.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. So explain this in a little more detail. Say they were hacking the pipeline, and then they contacted you to help. So how would that actually play out?
Okay, so assuming that we were there, our software or system was running on the systems there, we would then, at that point, they wouldn't even contact us. Essentially, they would run our decryption system and go out and decrypt all the files that were encrypted. And you're right back in business at that point.
Wow, okay, and then will this work on all ransomware? Is all ransomware virtually the same, or like, is there any?
Absolutely, an excellent question. And so the way this works is it's the beauty of this is why ransomware became so big is because encryption is so standardized and so well understood, right? Yeah. So if you imagine ransomware without encryption, if they don't encrypt your files, well, you probably can find another way to recover it. You can probably run a supercomputer to figure out what do they do to, corrupt my files so I can recover it the way they were, okay? The reason why people don't even bother doing that is because encryption works so well. Encryption is well understood. So what we go out there is we detect when encryption is done. So literally, if you go look at ransomware, they could do literally anything they want to do, right? They're innovating, and they're trying something new every single minute, every single month, okay? But the part that never changes is encryption. That has to be standards-based. And so when we go out there, we detect whether standard-based encryption, and we get the keys. Now, your next question is going to be, well, what happens when somebody doesn't go out around using standard-based encryption? Well, that's easily detectable. If you think about this, any app developer, whether they're selling to healthcare, whether they're selling to the government, you name it, FIPS, HIPAA, everybody now knows I have to use standard-based encryption. The days of where 30 years ago, somebody just said, I'm just going to invent my own standards, my own encryption. Well, that doesn't work. And so we go out there and detect, is this standard-based encryption? If it's not, that's truly easy to detect. That stands out. Okay, so then they can't hide from there.
Interesting. So you guys are attacking this from a completely different angle. Is there anyone else in parallel with you guys on this?
No, not that we're aware of. Obviously, our IP has been patented. Our key extraction has been patented, and in this facet of what we're doing with ransomware is patent pending.
Okay. So absolutely. Is there what's the timeline on getting this and kind of rolling this out? And has this been tested, and what's been the response and everything so far? Absolutely.
So we have some videos on our website that talks about some of the more common high-profile ransomwares where we ran our technology and decrypted all the files and its variants. We've ran it through our own labs, our development, and we've gone out and talked to our prospects and customers and other cybersecurity firms out there, and they're providing us tons and tons of different ransomwares. So just variants and variants after variants. And essentially what we're doing is we're running through that. We're verifying that every single one works. And so far, everything's working. So from a timeline standpoint, we want to make sure that we thoroughly not only catch the ones that we see the patient zero, we've seen them before, and we can see them again, and we got to solve that problem. But at the same time, we want to make sure that even if it's something we've never seen, we catch that too. That's the goal. That's where we want to get to.
So, Randy, when it comes to ransomware, can you give me an analogy that can kind of make it easier to understand for your common person who's not involved in cybersecurity or involved with anything coding related?
Absolutely. I get asked this question a lot. So think about when you're going to park your car with a valet, right? You get your keys to the valet. they park your car, and they put your key in this box that has all the keys for all the other cars out there. And so what ransomware essentially does is a bad actor is locking that box that has all the keys for all the cars. And then they're taking that key away and they're saying, hey, pay me this amount of money or you're never going to get the keys back for your car. Now, the analogy on the backups and the restores is the same. You can take the car, tow it, or go back to the manufacturer, go get another key. But that takes time. That's cumbersome, especially if you had hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of cars, if you start thinking about that.
Okay.
What we do is we could care less what key went into that box. We do standard-based encryption. We get the keys for the original cars, no matter what, even if they rekey the car. Every time they do something with the keys, we get the keys. We don't need the box, the key to the box at all. So that's the analogy. That's the best analogy that I can think of.
Yeah, that is a really interesting analogy, but it kind of begs the question from there. What are they going to do next? Let's say you solve this ransomware problem and how it's currently used with encryption 100%. Yes. What are they going to do? What's the next step from there for them?
From that perspective, we're essentially removing advanced weaponry from the bad actors. They can either decide, I'm going to not use standard-based encryption, and that's easily detectable. Again, the problem with non-standard-based encryption is supercomputers will break them. Other things will break them. Yeah. A good standard-based encryption becomes standard after 10, 20, 30 years. It does just, people just don't wake up the next morning and say, oh, I got this encryption. Nobody can break it. Right? So that's the first one. The second one is if they continue using standard-based encryption, obviously we're going to get the keys. So they can decide, I'm not going to use standard-based encryption, or I'm just not going to encrypt. And if you think about the realm, the size of the problem from there, well, if somebody doesn't have this advanced weaponry, ransomware with an encryption really is hard to imagine how important or how big ransomware is. They're still going to create a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong. Malware is still going to be big, but the size of it, it's hard to imagine it becoming the size it is today and growing at the rate it's growing without encryption being in there. Yeah. So that's what we hope to do. Remove the encryption.
Yeah. If I would apply my own analogy to it, I would say you're removing one of their most advanced weapons from their tool belt that they use against people.
The most advanced, the most accepted. Why one pays ransomware is they know they can get back their files. If there's no confidence in, well, they did this thing that nobody knows, and I don't know if I'm going to ever recover it. Well, if I'm one of the victims, I'm not incentivized at all to pay back that ransom.
Why pay?
I don't even know if I'm ever going to get the very files back. So the whole confidence level of how to corrupt things and how to get them all back is completely broken from that standpoint.
It's just really good that you guys now have this solution to this very, very big problem. One of the biggest problems mankind's ever faced, so to speak. But yes. From there, let's get down to the brass tacks or the bottom dollar, whatever you want to say. And how will you guys be able to utilize this to make Nubeva revenue?
So ultimately, just like we were making revenue with TLS, with SMB, this is the exact same thing. Somebody who wants to get the keys for ransomware, and that should be everybody who ever gets hit by ransomware, or anybody who's trying to protect their customers from ransomware. We go out and we want to license a product to them, and that's essentially how we get revenue. It's really no different. Okay. It's exactly what we're doing from a TLS technically standpoint, and really from a go-to-market standpoint, it's identical. The two are really hand-to-hand. There's really, when one says, well, what's the difference between a TLS key and TLS encryption, or SMB encryption, or ransomware encryption? The keys themselves and the encryption method are identical. There's really no, in fact, TLS is actually far more complicated than what you see in file encryption or email-based encryption.
Wow. Okay. So it's not really not that big of a change of a business model at all.
Not at all.
So you're just pretty much following the same lines there. Well, Randy, listen, thank you for fighting the cyber war for us out there. Thank you with the Nubeva team. And again, I know this was a long one, but this was a very important one. If anyone has any questions about anything we touched on, don't be afraid to say anything, unless, of course, you're someone who makes ransomware and you're trying to find a problem in the armor here. But Randy, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.